Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest with the Legionaries of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Quest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we are on day 323 and we're covering Gaudium et Spes 41. The overall theme of this is the Church has the surest anchor for human dignity. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican and frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we spoke about how the Church will be fully manifest in a resurrection, while here it elevates humanity. Today, we'll continue with Chapter 4, the role of the Church in the modern world. And our summary is, man yearns for the divine, which God offers to the Church, giving life meaning, and the Church protects dignity and rights. So, in this paragraph 41, there are 5 subparagraphs, and we'll read them in 4 parts. A, the Church can provide meaning for man. 41b, man always yearns to know the divine, but only God can show him. C, the Church can protect human dignity and proclaim freedom better than any merely human institution. The Church is a human institution, but it's not merely human. 41d and e, God is the Lord of history, but gives us freedom, and thus the Church protects human rights. So let's go straight into 41a. Modern man is on the road to a more thorough development of his own personality, and to a growing discovery and vindication of his own rights. Since it has been entrusted to the Church to reveal the mystery of God, who is the ultimate goal of man, she opens up to man at the same time the meaning of his own existence. That is, the inmost truth about himself. The Church truly knows that only God, whom she serves, meets the deepest longings of the human heart, which is never satisfied by what this world has to offer. This subparagraph notes our own searching for meaning today. We have more where we develop our personality today than back in the past. In the past, it was kind of just provided you were the son of so-and-so or daughter of so-and-so and you lived in this village and you were this profession, whatever. Even we see that in how we have our last names. A lot of last names refer to things like ancestors or to their professions. Like all your names ending in EZ or EZ in Spanish are just son of. Mick, Mac, O, son, sen are all just son of. And then my name, for example, Schneider, just refers to a job. It refers to the job of tailor, somebody who makes clothes. And a whole bunch of other names are like that. Smith, Baker, Farber, Taylor in English, and then you have the same ones in other languages, like my own. But in our modern world, we want to each seek our own meaning. We want to develop our meaning. And that really has a new reality the Church has to respond to. And so the Church responds to this. The Church reveals the depths of God to man. And in these depths, in this understanding of God, man can fully understand himself. This is what gives us our deepest meaning. This is what we long for. St. Augustine had that whole idea of him going for this whole time, longing for God and finally finding him. Moving on to 41b, this talks about how man always yearns to know the divine, but only God can show him that. Here, what I mean by the divine is just some kind of higher power, divinity, not necessarily God himself, as often this desire for God is implicit and might not be so explicit as to recognize a single God or a single higher power, much less the Trinity. Let's read it. B. She also knows that man is constantly worked upon by God's Spirit, and hence can never be altogether indifferent to the problems of religion. The experience of past ages proves this, as do numerous indications in our own times. For man will always yearn to know, at least in an obscure way, what the meaning of his life, of his activity, and of his death. The very presence of the church recalls these problems to his mind. But only God, who created man in his own image and ransomed him by sin, provides the most adequate answer to the questions. And this he does through what he has revealed in Christ his Son, who became man. Whoever follows after Christ, the perfect man, becomes himself more a man. For by his incarnation, the Father's word assumed and sanctified through his cross and resurrection the whole of man, body and soul, and through that totality the whole of nature created by God for man's use. This subparagraph notes how man always yearns for greater knowledge. We always want to know more. Now, sometimes this more is just more gossip or things like that. Not the best seeking knowledge, but we all want to know more. And what is the greatest knowledge? The greatest knowledge is this higher power, this divinity. Obviously, we see this in a single God, in the Trinity, as Catholics, but this idea of divinity, of higher power, is there. Everyone yearns to know the divine, at least implicitly. And in any religion, it is that divinity, that ultimate power that gives meaning. Whether that divinity is Shiva, Allah, God, Zeus, and all his different gods, whatever, that's what gives it meaning. We get our meaning ultimately from the Trinity. But one interesting thing about God is that only he has the power to reveal himself. We can't reveal God on our own. We need him to reveal himself. And he provides such deep answers. Following Jesus in this way makes us more human, makes us more who we are called to be. And the final section of this subparagraph talks about how Jesus transformed all of us humans via the resurrection. The resurrection is not just a historical event. It is historical. It happened in about 30 to 33 AD. I'm not 100% sure on the year. Even 28 sometimes is proposed. But it is more than a historical event. It transforms what it means to be human. Our body, our soul are all transformed. So, moving on to 41C. The summary is, the church can protect dignity and proclaim freedom better than any merely human institution. Let's read it. C. Thanks to this belief, the church can anchor the dignity of human nature against all tides of opinion. For example, those who undervalue the human body or idolize it. By no human law can the personal dignity and liberty of man be so aptly safeguarded as by the gospel of Christ which has been entrusted to the church. For this gospel announces and proclaims the freedom of the sons of God, and repudiates all bondage which ultimately results from sin. Confer Romans 8. It has a secret reverence for the dignity of conscience and its freedom of choice, constantly advises that all human talents be employed in God's service and men's, and finally, commends all to the charity of all. Confer Matthew 22. This paragraph begins by talking about dignity and how the church can protect it. We have to think of how it is attacked. At the time of Vatican II, communism was a huge attack on human dignity. In communism, you don't have dignity as a person. You as a person are just your social relationships, ultimately your economic relationships. So you're just a cog in the machine. That's contrary to the Christian vision of dignity. Today we have other dangers. We have biotech that turns people into just a biology, a flesh robot or something. We have this idea of idolizing it or undervaluing it. We have the idolization in a lot of sexualized content and things like that. Or the devaluing in a lot of other things. But what anchors human dignity? These human things, these human laws are helpful, but they're insufficient on their own. The only sure anchor we have is the church. And what gives the church its sure anchor? The gospel. This is why the gospel is the source for dignity, the best source for dignity. Now, obviously, the gospel is only available by faith. We can know that God exists. We can know that human beings have body and soul by reason alone. We can't know the gospel that way. And so we need to start with what people know by reason and move towards the gospel, the good news. Finally, for this 41C, it talks about how the gospel announces our freedom as sons of God. We are free. And it repudiates this bondage to sin. This is a danger we have as human beings. We can get all caught up in sin, and this destroys our freedom. And it commends ultimately that we all work employing all at God's service. All our talents are put forward towards charity, towards all. We should have that charity as Christians. Moving on to our last section today, 41D and E. Talk about how God is Lord of history, but gives us freedom. D, and then E. Thus, the church protects human rights. D. This agrees with the basic law of Christian dispensation. Though the same God is Savior and Creator, Lord of human history as well as of salvation history, in the divine arrangement itself, the rightful autonomy of the creature, and particularly of man, is not withdrawn, but has rather reestablished his own dignity and strengthened in it. E. The Church, therefore, by virtue of the gospel committed to her, proclaims the rights of men. She acknowledges and greatly esteems the dynamic movements of today, by which these rights are everywhere fostered. Yet these movements must be penetrated by the spirit of the gospel and protected against any kind of false autonomy. For we are tempted to think that our personal rights are fully ensured only when we are exempt from every requirement of divine law. But this way lies not the maintenance of the dignity of the person, but its annihilation. God has control of all. God is in control. That's what 41D starts off with. But what does God think of us? He wants us to be free. He values our freedom. Not just freedom from sin, but freedom of the will. And that's what He gives us autonomy. He allows us to work on our own, autonomously. And this, in turn, becomes part of our dignity. Moving on to E, it talks about how the church proclaims the rights of men. These are based on the gospel. There are many good things moving towards the rights of men today. But in this subparagraph, the church is noting the dangers of making this kind of false autonomy and separating it from the gospel, where I think of man not as dependent on God, but as somehow self-sufficient. The church wants to work with those who are looking for true dignity, looking for this truth here. But there are limitations to what man can do because we are dependent on God. We are creatures. This concludes today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarQuest Prusit and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we will continue with the next paragraph of Gaudium et Spes. That is paragraph 42 on the value of social movements. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information on the podcast, such as playlists for individual documents and a reading plan, you can go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X. Amen.